Chapter 11. The Seeds of Spring. 3 weeks flew by in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Edward had departed for Chicago, though his presence persisted in the letters that arrived daily for Margaret. His tidy script provided little of the affection Margaret had once spoken of so fondly. Clara watched her sister-in-law sit by the fireplace, a recent letter from him unfolded in her lap. Margaret's demeanor changed as she read the letter, a flash of emotion sweeping across her face, before she looked up at Andrew Bennett, seated opposite her. "Edward writes about his successes," Margaret said, her speech light, though strained underneath. She held the letter between her fingers, her wedding ring loose enough to spin idly as she spoke. "Always business, never about us." Andrew rested his elbows on his knees and leaned toward her. "That must be difficult," he answered, his tone cautious, measured. But the way he watched her spoke of questions and conversations he wouldn't voice. A small, reluctant smile formed on Margaret's lips. Her expression shifted, a guard lowering, then rising again. "It is difficult," she said, folding the letter with precise creases before setting it aside. Clara's chest tightened at the undercurrent between them. She busied herself with filling the tea kettle with water, though the image persisted. A letter left unfinished, a ring that seemed too loose on Margaret's finger, and a bachelor whose gaze lingered a beat too long. On the travel day to Boston, Clara woke at the crack of dawn. Daybreak held a peculiar stillness that preceded important moments, as a hush that settles in a theater seconds before the curtain rises. Since the meeting with the selectmen, Nathan and Thomas had collaborated in Nathan's workshop as they prepared for the State House Committee. They finished the Henderson Cradle, a masterwork showcasing their talents, Nathan's creative genius and Thomas's practical strength, resulting in a creation both unique and enduring. The nausea that had plagued Clara's prior weeks of pregnancy had eased, though her dresses were growing snug at her waist. Few were aware of her secret, a subdued joy she and Nathan treasured while greater conflicts loomed. "Are you certain you're able to travel?" Nathan questioned as she packed their carpet bag. "It's a 3-hour train journey to Boston, with all its jolts and sways." "Yes, I'm certain." She carefully arranged Nathan's best suit, a finely tailored wool ensemble, between layers of tissue paper to keep it clean. Margaret came to their doorstep, then walked inside the house. She pressed a basket into Clara's hands, the aroma of freshly baked bread combining with the pungent tang of cheese. "There's ham and mustard, roast beef, and a few egg salad sandwiches." She tucked in a thermos of hot apple cider. "That should keep you warm enough." "Thank you." Clara nodded, grateful for Margaret's care. "But aren't you coming?" "I'll take a later train." Margaret pulled a telegram from her handbag. "Edward asked me to meet him at the Copley Plaza Hotel in Boston before the hearing. He's traveling from Chicago with his investors, bringing fresh proposals using the Whitmore name. They want me there early to discuss my loyalties, I suppose. I must be with my husband, whether I agree with him." She smoothed the fabric of her skirt, the motion both deliberate and distracted. "He wrote that I could have anything I want, a magnificent house, the latest conveniences, everything except—" "Except?" Clara kept her voice gentle, giving Margaret space to find her words. "Except truth, except what's right. Some choices make themselves, if we're brave enough to listen." Margaret's city polish fell away, revealing the same girl who'd once helped Clara plant her first kitchen garden, sure about what mattered even then. "You are quite brave," Clara said. "Sometimes." Her grip found Clara's hand. "Ensure every piece of evidence you've gathered counts. The choice between what glitters and what endures. Show those Bostonians what burns at the heart of this valley. They were a small group. Nathan, with his calloused hands, Thomas, eager to show their father's techniques, Andrew Bennett, with his legal papers and prestigious education. Clara, in her best simple dress, a well-loved navy blue frock fashioned from sturdy wool, with full-length sleeves and a plain white collar, starched to perfection. Edward's lawyers would occupy a fine hotel near Beacon Hill, poised to dazzle the committee members with pledges of prosperity. Yet they couldn't provide evidence to counter the losses if craftsmanship were to die in the Berkshires. The trip to Wiley's Crossing Station took a while in the early March weather. Thomas's truck led their procession, the Henderson cradle secured in back, protected against the damp air. Andrew's Model T followed. Mrs. Kelly and Peter stood at their gate, Nathan's carved chair visible through their front window. Other villagers paused in their routines. Mrs. Phillips on her porch, Reverend Josiah Pembroke and his wife by the church, Chairman Proctor nodding from the mercantile steps. Nathan's expression alternated between certainty and doubt, reminding Clara of when he'd built the Henderson cradle, testing each curve against an inner image visible only to him. The train station soon came into view, its wooden platform scarred by decades of use. The station master, Mr. Murphy, his brass buttons gleaming in the weak sunlight, helped them unload the cradle. Inside the station, a pot-bellied stove fought the winter chill. A few other passengers waited. A traveling salesman with his case of samples, 2 well-dressed ladies speaking quietly behind gloved hands, and a mother soothing a fussy baby. Shortly, the train whistle pierced the silence, and the platform shuddered beneath Clara's feet as the massive steam engine drew near. Settling into her seat, a short while later, she leaned against the window while Thomas, Nathan, and Andrew loaded the cradle into the baggage car. As soon as the train car lurched forward, Clara's stomach rolled. Wordlessly, Nathan offered her the peppermints Dr. Campbell had recommended for the trip. "Tell me about your memories of Boston," she said, hoping the conversation might settle her queasiness. His arm covered hers on the velvet armrest. "You've heard them all before." "Tell me again. I've never been there, but you were there once or twice." "Only once." "With Father," Nathan said. "We delivered an armoire and a set of bookshelves to a wealthy family in Beacon Hill. Father had an impeccable eye for balance. He also built a few other pieces for them." "What else did he build?" Clara asked. "A writing desk for the lady of the house. Believe me, it was top-notch. The top could tilt for writing or lie flat for sewing. Father spent weeks choosing boards where the grain matched perfectly, so when you opened it, each piece flowed into the next like water." Nathan traced an invisible pattern in the air. He said that was the key, not forcing the wood, but allowing the natural lines to guide how the parts joined. "He was a gifted artist." "Yes, and he understood how to talk to those Boston folk," Nathan went on. "Not only discussing the furniture, but the expertise itself. He taught them the difference between owning furniture and purchasing an heirloom." She nodded as the Massachusetts countryside rolled past, fields waiting for planting, stone walls defining ancient boundaries, church steeples rising up from sleepy communities. Each mile propelled them closer to a city of high-reaching brownstones, ivy-clad buildings, and cobblestone streets. Clara dozed fitfully against Nathan's shoulder until the train's tempo changed, the wheels clicking slower as they neared the city. Opening her eyes, the landscape had transformed. Factories lined the rails, their brick chimneys belching smoke into a pewter sky. Workers scurried between structures, heads bent against the wind. Edward's vision of progress, she murmured, observing a row of men filing into a furniture factory. The flash of machinery poured out through its high window, the mechanized rhythm of production. The train slowed, threading through Boston's outskirts. 3-story row houses crowded close to the tracks, laundry strung between buildings like tired flags. Then the city proper revealed itself, all hard stone and ambition. South Station's towering iron and glass ceiling arched overhead as they stepped onto the platform. Such a crush of humanity, Clara thought. Ladies in drop-waisted wool suits and cloche hats hurried past, their hemlines daringly at the knee. The businessmen wore dark 3-piece suits with watch chains, fedoras tilted at jaunty angles. Laborers trudged past in heavy work jackets and flat caps, while shopgirls in their straight silk dresses and bobbed hair wove through the crowd. "Mr. Whitmore?" A man in a chauffeur's uniform came forward. "Mr. Bennett rented a motor car for your party." He gestured to a gleaming black automobile idling at the curb. "Your cradle will follow in our truck." Boston unfolded as they drove, a city of streetcars and traffic signals, department stores with window displays that left Bartlett's Emporium in Pittsfield looking provincial. Women wrapped in seal and sable coats stepped carefully in their winter Oxfords, while typists in tweed suits and rubber-soled boots clutched their umbrellas, protecting their carefully waved hair from the January wind. Meanwhile, uniformed doormen stood guard in the front of fancy hotels. They'd taken rooms at a modest hotel bordering Beacon Hill, conveniently located to the State House, yet far enough from the grand houses to fit their budget. The lobby's frayed carpet and faded wallpaper spoke of bygone elegance carefully maintained. "The truck with the cradle is directly behind us," Andrew assured Nathan, who kept glancing over his shoulder as if the piece might vanish into Boston's busy streets. Stiff curtains and narrow beds characterized their cramped but clean rooms. Thomas and Andrew shared one room, and Nathan and Clara the other. Clara set their carpet bag on a quilted bedspread, while Nathan paced, his restlessness clear with each step. "The hearing isn't until tomorrow morning," Thomas reminded, leaning in the doorway. "Sufficient time to rest and prepare." Rest, though, seemed impossible, with so much at stake. Shortly after settling in, a bellboy knocked at the door. Clara accepted the envelope and immediately recognized Edward's sharp strokes before Nathan even reached for it. "Edward is here," Nathan said, scanning the note. "He's at the Copley Plaza Hotel with his lawyers, and Margaret should arrive shortly. He wishes to meet, to discuss." He glanced at Andrew and Thomas, who had come into the room. "To discuss terms." "What kind of terms?" Andrew asked. "A proposition," Nathan replied. "Edward will build his factory in Evergreen Hollow and stamp our family name on factory pieces. Claims they'll carry the spirit of craftsmanship." The last words came out like splinters. Thomas slapped the arm of his chair. "Dressing machines in a craftsman's clothes. Never." The door rattled again under urgent knocking. The hotel manager burst in, his customary polish gone, collar askew, perspiration beading his brow. "Sorry to interrupt, but a complication has come up. Your truck. Someone reported suspicious activity around it." "The cradle is in the truck?" Clara asked. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." "With the cradle being evidence for tomorrow's hearing, we can't—" Clara began. "I'll manage this," Thomas said, but Nathan was already moving, his overcoat half on, as he pushed past the manager. In the hotel's back alley, their predicament drew a small crowd. The Henderson cradle, wrapped in quilted padding, couldn't stay vulnerable on the truck overnight in Boston. The hotel's storage room offered little security, and the manager fretted about liability for such a valuable piece. "I have a simple solution." Edward appeared, adjusting his leather gloves. His casual manner suggested this was no chance encounter. "My showroom is 3 blocks away, climate-controlled, proper security. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." "No, thank you," Clara replied decisively. The cradle was more than furniture. It was their testimony. "The cradle stays with us." "If I may," Andrew interrupted. "There's a church on the corner. I noticed its side chapel when we arrived." The Roman Catholic Church's wooden doors opened wide, and the priest, understanding their dilemma, offered sanctuary. As Nathan and Thomas carried the cradle up the steps, Clara watched the last bit of sunlight filter through stained glass, spattering hues of ruby and amber across the pews, as if a divine hand had touched the surfaces. Back at the hotel, Clara sorted Nathan's letters on a brass-hinged lap desk, while Thomas and Andrew reviewed their papers by gaslight. The thin walls filtered the constant pulse of metropolitan activity, car horns, streetcar bells, and the sounds of improvement they were in Boston to challenge. "We should review once more what you'll say tomorrow," Andrew advised Nathan. Nathan strode back and forth, focusing on the church spire outside the window where the cradle resided. "I've been thinking about Father's last commission," he said, glancing at Thomas. "The altar for St. Michael's, remember?" Thomas nodded. "You carved the angels while I built the frame." A clerk appeared in the open doorway. "From Mrs. Parker at the Copley Plaza." He extended a leather portfolio. Nathan accepted and laid out the portfolio's contents, paging spilling across the writing desk. "Margaret sent us some information. Every furniture factory from Providence to Portland has signed affidavits supporting him. Mechanized production, they claim, is the only path forward." His jaw tightened as he read. "And the governor's wife has written to support the standardization." Thomas bent closer. "Mrs. Bradford? She's the woman who rejected my work," Nathan finished. "Currently, she chairs the committee on modernizing state institutions." Clara touched her waist, thinking of their child, too tiny yet for movement, but already giving her courage for this fight. "Then they'll soon learn what money and machines will never grasp." She lifted Nathan's journal. "Heritage, what it means to a community, to families, to the soul of New England itself." The following day, the hotel radiator hissed its warm melody while Clara checked her hair one more time. She and Nathan found Thomas waiting in the dining room, where silver coffee urns gleamed and white-aproned servers weaved between tables. Nathan barely touched his eggs. Benedict, his attention fixed on several sketches, while Andrew reviewed his notes one last time. Thomas had arranged for the cradle's transport from the church. 2 careful-handed porters would deliver it to the State House's side entrance, where the committee had agreed to receive it as evidence. In the sharp morning air, the brief carriage ride to 24 Beacon Street cleared their heads. At the State House steps, Andrew nodded at the cradle being carried in, its quilted wrapping still in place. Clara decided that the Massachusetts State House chambers made Evergreen Hollow's town hall seem as modest as a country church. Granite pillars extended toward a gilt-coffered ceiling, while tall windows admitted the sunlight. The committee members presided from behind a curved mahogany desk, its surface gleaming with generations of polish. Mrs. Catherine Bradford, the governor's wife, held the center position, her silver hair crowned by a toque hat, a small, brimless hat. Her plum-colored silk dress and string of pearls were a testament to her understated wealth. Manufacturing representatives flanked her right side, while members of the Massachusetts Historical Society occupied the left, their fountain pens poised over leather-bound notebooks. Edward claimed a front row seat with his legal team and investors, and Margaret sat next to him. Her spine remained ramrod straight, like a bird poised for flight, while her hands lay too still in her lap. Knowing Margaret was caught in his world, yet not fully at home in it, Clara sympathized with her sister-in-law, a tug-of-war between loyalty and misgivings, and Clara wondered which side Margaret would choose when a critical moment arrived. The Henderson cradle stood before the committee. Nathan and Thomas stayed beside it, while Andrew arranged their evidence on the presentations table: photographs, letters, their father's journal. Other items included financial records detailing how Edward had undercut local craftsmen, forcing them to close. In addition, documents illustrated how store credit and housing trapped workers in debt. The committee will hear testimony regarding the preservation of traditional trades in Massachusetts, the clerk announced, specifically the impact of industrial development on heritage industries. Mrs. Bradford swung to Edward. Mr. Parker, your proposal suggests standardization will benefit the Commonwealth. Please proceed, sir. Edward took command of the floor, clearly confident in this assembly of power and protocol. His presentation unfolded with practiced precision, charts displaying production rates, cost analyses, and projections of economic growth. Simultaneously, his lawyers distributed bound copies of his presentation to the members. Progress, Edward concluded, demands we relinquish romantic notions about handcraft. Massachusetts industries must advance with the century, not wither in the shadow of outdated practices. When it was his turn to speak, Nathan stood and rested his hand on the Henderson cradle. I'll demonstrate what technique truly means. He stepped back and let the cradle speak its own truth, the pure arch of its frame, hints of flight tucked into quiet corners, and seams that married wood to wood without modern shortcuts. This isn't merely furniture, he said. This is visible heritage. Every piece tells a story of who we are, where we hail from. And what we risk losing, Andrew declared as he stood to address the committee. Through legal channels, I uncovered Edward's actual plans. His eyes locked with Edward's before he gestured to his documents. These letters reveal procedures beyond a single factory. They depict the systematic destruction of craft workshops throughout Massachusetts. Edward's lawyers straightened in their chairs, their pens stilling mid-note. One came to his feet and bent forward to whisper in Edward's ear, though Edward waved him away. Growth requires tough choices, Edward said. Certainly some smaller workshops may have to adapt, or... Mrs. Bradford adjusted her lorgnette, studying the papers Andrew had placed before her. Or what? Will someone destroy them? Her voice silenced Edward's explanation as she lifted a paper. These projections reveal strategies to undercut local craftsmen through predatory pricing until they're forced to sell. I assure you, madam, Edward began. Mr. Parker. Mrs. Bradford rose to her full height and faced Edward directly. This committee's purpose is to consider how modernization might serve Massachusetts, not destroy its heritage. She turned to Nathan. Mr. Whitmore, will you show us the techniques used in this cradle? Nathan's hands glided over the wood with calm confidence. Madam, see how the pieces embrace. My grandfather taught this to my father. You cut one piece to clasp the other, like fingers weaving together. My brother Thomas and I spent summers mastering this. When it's right, time can't pull this furniture apart. Mrs. Bradford's stern brows eased, the tightness around her mouth melting as Nathan guided her through each stage with meticulous precision. Her practiced society mask wavered, caught between surprise and reluctant approval, as he illustrated the finer points of his work. Each nod grew slower, more thoughtful, her gaze warming with an interest that hadn't existed moments earlier. Her silk skirt whispered against the polished floor as she neared the cradle. "My grandmother's cradle." She paused, her gloved fingers hovering over the carved wings. "It had angels, much like these?" "The piece was no longer in our possession by the time my children were grown." The chamber became quiet, save for the scratch of the stenographer's pencil and the rustle of official papers. She turned to face the chamber. "This committee will retire to deliberate," she announced. "Mr. Parker, Mr. Whitmore, please remain within the State House should we require clarification." She led the members through a brass-handled door to their private chamber. The other officials followed, the manufacturing representatives with their attaché cases and the Historical Society members. In the main chamber, Edward huddled with his lawyers beside a marble fireplace, conferring in urgent whispers. Margaret sat ramrod straight, her fingers whirring the edge of her handkerchief while refusing to make eye contact with anyone. After what seemed like hours, but was only 45 minutes, the committee returned. Mrs. Bradford settled at the center. "We've reached a decision," she said. "The Commonwealth of Massachusetts must lead the nation in balancing progress with preservation. Therefore, we recommend the establishment of a statewide preservation program for heritage crafts. Manufacturing enterprises must show they will protect, instead of eliminate, traditional methods." She lifted a document. "We propose tax incentives for businesses that maintain craftsmanship divisions and government funding for apprenticeship programs throughout Massachusetts. Mr. Parker, your current proposal does not satisfy these standards. You are required to submit significant revisions before proceeding with any of your factory plans." Edward's lawyers began scribbling notes, though Edward sat motionless. Thomas strode to Nathan's side, the brothers' shoulders brushing, a gesture that spoke of reunion after too many years apart. Mrs. Bradford removed her lorgnette, her gaze shifting from the cradle to Edward. "Mr. Parker, you talked of progress. Genuine progress preserves what is valuable while developing innovative products. The Whitmore brothers have shown us how tradition and innovation function together, as their father taught them." As Clara listened, Nathan moved to join her, his fingers curled around hers, his touch offering love and relief. "The clerk will record our recommendations," Mrs. Bradford concluded. "I adjourn this hearing." The massive doors swung open, letting in the sounds of the State House, footsteps echoing on marble floors, hushed conversations in distant corridors, the muffled toll of the clock tower marking the hour. A secretary rushed past with an armful of leather-bound volumes, while two legislators stopped their discussion to walk into the chamber and study the Henderson cradle. From a window, Clara glimpsed Governor Bradford himself in the courtyard, his dark coat and bowler hat distinguishing him in the crowd. He hadn't attended the hearing, such matters being beneath his direct attention. His wife's influence would ensure these directives became policy. Edward exited the chamber without a backward glance, his lawyers trailing behind with their bound presentations. Margaret hesitated, then followed her husband. She paused at the door, her hand resting briefly on the frame as if reluctant to leave. "We can deliver the cradle to your hotel," Mrs. Bradford said, approaching Nathan and Thomas. Her gaze fell on the carved angels. "Unless—" She glanced toward the State House's grand entry hall. "Perhaps it might remain on display here for a few days, as an example of our efforts to preserve." a wordless understanding passing between the men, the same implicit bond they'd shared as boys when their father entrusted them with a prized piece of wood. "We're honored," Nathan said. "However, we'd like to get back to Evergreen Hollow." "Of course. We'll return the cradle to you by week's end." Mrs. Bradford signaled to a uniformed attendant. "Position the cradle in the main rotunda where the sunlight from the dome highlights it perfectly. Add a brass plaque bearing the Whitmore name." Together, they continued through the hall. A group of school children on a civics tour pressed their noses against the chamber's windows, pointing at the cradle's carved angels. The scent of pipe tobacco wafted from the legislators' lounge, combining with furniture polish and the musty warmth of steam radiators. Outside, automobiles honked, while horse-drawn wagons clip-clopped. Here, the past, present, and future existed side by side. "You're required to sign some papers," Andrew said to Nathan, "for the official record." As Nathan put his name to the documents, Edward and Margaret stood nearby in intense conversation. Edward's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking below his temple, as muted voices rose and fell among his investors a short distance away. "You've preserved more than craft today," Mrs. Bradford said, as Nathan's pen flowed across the page. "Implementing any changes isn't simple, especially in communities already divided over progress. Now, about that dining room suite." Her tone shifted, becoming more pointed. "I believe it's an opportune time to revisit our previous conversation. The suite you so kindly built for me a few years ago." She allowed her statements to linger as her lips painted a vivid red, curved into a measured smile. "I've reconsidered. It seems my tastes have evolved. I would be grateful if you could once again apply your exceptional talents to craft me another suite." Nathan's pen stilled, her invitation hanging in the air like an unexpected reprieve. Memories flickered. Clara knew the sting of Mrs. Bradford's previous rejection. It had been more than a commission. It had been a public rebuke that had nearly crushed Nathan's spirit. Mrs. Bradford's renewed interest was more than a mere artistic caprice. Her smile suggested a complexity, perhaps a hint of regret, or a recalculation of Nathan's worth. Clara understood the delicate dance of Boston's social circles, where reputation could turn on the smallest of gestures. Nathan half closed his eyes, his posture betraying nothing. But Clara could read the subtle tension in his shoulders, the nearly imperceptible intake of breath. This was a moment of potential redemption, a chance to transform a past rejection into a triumph. It wasn't only about the money, it was about validation. Reconsideration was no trivial matter. A commission from such a prominent social figure meant substantially more than mere financial compensation. Mrs. Bradford's wealth was considerable. The governor's family moved in circles where money flowed like fine wine, where a single commission elevated an artist's reputation from obscure to noteworthy. Her smile suggested the offer was generous, not simply a few $100s, but likely several thousand, a sum that could secure their financial stability for months, perhaps even a year. Clara stepped closer, not to interfere, but to provide an invisible anchor. Their shared history, their years of struggle, seemed to vibrate between Nathan and the governor's wife. After several beats, he opened his eyes and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Of course, madam," he said, his voice tinged with the faintest hint of irony. "I'll begin drawing a design to your liking." Clara thought of Evergreen Hollow, the selectmen weighing established practices against Edward's promises, the mill workers expecting steady wages, and that plot of land by Wiley's Crossing, soon to be under Edward's ownership. Margaret came closer. "Edward and I will board the evening train to Chicago," she said, a quiver in her voice. "A wife's place is with her husband. Perhaps we might all find a solution to blend the old with the new, as the committee proposed." Her gaze flicked briefly to Andrew before she swiveled, her hands pressing down on her wool coat. She walked to Edward's waiting car, her shoulders straight, never turning. Some choices were harder than others, and duty and love didn't always agree. As they descended the granite steps, Nathan's hand repeatedly returned to his coat pocket, where he tucked the committee's signed recommendations, as if reassuring himself this victory was real. Two worlds intersected on Beacon Street, Edward's motor car heading toward the train station, while a man repaired a carriage wheel on the side of the road, his hands forming the same sure rhythm as Nathan's. "Ready to go home?" Nathan asked Clara. His eyes tracked the lone figure of Andrew Bennett, who stood watching Margaret's departure until the motor car disappeared around a corner. "Home," Clara repeated, her voice a prayer of faith and promise. "Yes, I'm ready." The wind caught her skirts, carrying the first hint of spring. Providence had carved unexpected pathways through rejection, through struggle, and now had opened another door. Home to Nathan's workshop, where new pieces waited to be born, the baby growing beneath her heart, of all the battles, large and small, that lay ahead. Behind them, showcased in the State House, the Henderson cradle's carved angels continued their vigil, while on the cobblestone streets, the sound of hooves and motors mingled as a song still writing itself.